Okay, so here we are again. This is part two of that demo. As you can see, the softbox is looking nice and clean now. There's no diffusion material hanging down from it. And what I've done is place the diffusion material, it's just Velcros in, into the actual softbox frame. And this is what it's done to the quality of the light. Okay, it's made it a lot softer. What that does for your subjects when you're talking about people, and again, I'll demonstrate this more on my lights at home, but it creates nice soft transitions on their faces so that you don't have these hard shadows that show up every nook and cranny, every pore, every blemish, every irregularity on your subject's face, which is always a good thing if you're trying to make people appear or look nice and flattering. Having said that, that's not always the look you're looking for. Sometimes you want something more severe, so you will just take that light diffusion material off, and just as in the last video, you'll be able to look at a much harder contrast to your image. Okay. Diffusion material can be part of a softbox like this. It can also be part of something you can use from your home, like for instance, a shower curtain, a white shower curtain, a sheet. You can put your light behind a sheet and shine light through that, and that'll give you a nice soft diffusion. Or you can go to the fabric store, and again, I'm going to give you some pointers on types of material to buy in those fabric stores. Ripstop nylon is one of them. Actually, that's what this diffusion material on the softbox is made of, is ripstop nylon. And yeah, you can go to town. You can also use diffusion material that has a color to it and add some color to your photographs. And that's always a creative way to produce some uniqueness in your images. But as you can see, comparing this to before, the light is much softer and it creates a much hazier, gradual shadow on your subject. That's the diffusion material that does that. However, another thing that will soften your shadows and the light on your shadows is the size of the light. So if you're looking at a light such as this, I'm gonna turn this little guy here, I don't know if you can, oh yeah, you can see it. Oop. It's hard to do this with one hand. Come on, stay on. There we go. All right, so that light's on. I'm gonna crank it right up. Now, you can see that now it's overpowering the other light, and we now have much harder shadows again. Okay, so it's a very small point source of light. If you use this in portraiture, you'll have a very pronounced pattern on your subject's face, and you will either have the highlight side, which is the bright side, lit with no detail on the dark side, or if you add some sort of fill in there on the other side, which is basically a reflector of some kind that bounces some light back in, you'll have a bit softer look to it. However, you will never achieve this kind of softness with this light source here without expanding the light source or putting some diffusion in front of it. If, however, that light source there wasn't that little pinpoint, and we don't have this here, but if we actually had a panel of LEDs that were, say, the size of this softbox, you would then have a very similar look to your subject. Still a little bit harder, but if it was the same size of this softbox, it would produce a much softer light. And we'll explain that in a future class, but the larger your light source, the softer the effect on your subject is going to be, okay? The smaller, more pinpoint your light source, the harder your shadows are going to be. And if you go outside on a sunny day and glance up at the sky, don't stare at it, you'll see that our planet's main source of light, the sun, is a very small point source of light from our perspective. Okay, which is why when you look at subjects outside, the light on their faces always produces very hard shadows. Okay, if the sun filled most of the sky, you would find that our shadows are a lot softer. Okay, you'd also find that we would be burned to a crisp. But anyway, if you go out on an overcast day, those clouds produce much the same effect as that softbox. They diffuse the light, they spread it out, they make it come from different directions, and it gives you much softer light. So cloudy days generally are better days for shooting portraits outside. At any rate, I believe that's all I needed to tell you. This is what the background looks like. I'm trying to back up here without hitting lights. In the studio, when it's pulled out, you could even pull it out a bit further. I just didn't really need that extra space because I'm not shooting anything here today. Generally, the reason why you pull the background out really far is so that you have a consistent sort of background for your photographs. So you don't suddenly have cut off. If you're doing a portrait and you're backed up way over here shooting at your subject here, you don't have the bottom of your frame showing the black floor. So you pull it out as far as you need to. You try to maintain the material in as good a condition as possible. Don't walk on it with your boots, all that sort of stuff. And then as you can see, I have my subject pretty far out from the background. So if I didn't have this light on, so I'll turn that off. So now we've got the shadows there. You can see they fall down behind. And then if I actually have another light on as fill, you pretty much eliminate them. And that gives you a really nice light for your subject. If I had a subject here, they'd have a fairly decent light on them. But if I had that further back, closer to the background, we would have this sort of situation where now the shadow's on the background and it's also in your shot. And even with both lights on, it's still a harder shadow and a more noticeable shadow on your background. Okay, turn that off and you can really see it. All right. So when you shoot this, when you expose your subject properly and you shoot this, what you see with your eye is amplified in your camera. So that black on the background there where the shadow is will seem blacker, and the white will seem whiter. The contrast spreads out, so it will actually be even more pronounced in your photograph. So definitely you don't want your subject positioned that close to the background, unless of course you're going for some sort of shadow in your shot, which is also a possibility. It's just being aware of these things and setting up your lighting and equipment to produce the creative effect you want. All right, that's about it for this one. Thank you for listening. Talk to you soon.